This is Richie coming at you from the School of Marketing HQ. Before you dive into the show, I just want to tell you about a brand new short 12-week program that we've launched called the Giants Marketing Masterclass. The program gives you access to insights from over 25 CEOs and CMOs from major companies in 6 areas: customer, brand, commercial, creative, channel, and data strategy. So if you are looking to upskill yourself or your team in just 2.5 hours each week, do check out the School of Marketing website for more deets. Alrighty, for now, enjoy the show.
Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the Places We'll Go show. Now firmly into the second 100 batch of episodes. So huge back catalogue if you enjoy and want to go back. But today we're very pleased and privileged to have Dan Sherwood from Santander on the show. Welcome, Dan.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, guys.
Well, no, thank you, in fact. For those who don't know a little bit about Dan, like myself, financial services stalwart. We were just literally talking about how scintillating it would be if we were to talk about our company strategies, but we'll spare you that. But no, Dan has been at Santander for 17 years, started his career at Accenture, but he's done a long stint at Santander. And it's a great story of somebody coming up through the ranks. So we often talk to people who have flitted around, danced around, and made a career out of moving all over the place. But of course, that's not the only way. And you will have probably seen recently Mark Ritson talking about the benefits of tenure and how that builds skill and expertise and confidence and trust so that you can get the good stuff done. And with CMO tenure crashing, it seems to be, great benefits in tenure. I also did a decade in my job. But other things. So Dan is also an advisor to Children's Hospital Charity, so does manage to find time to do a few side projects. The other thing that's interesting about Dan is he did do a career in marketing. Many people fall into marketing, but Dan may be somewhat deliberate. We'll find out a little bit more. And we've been in a few things together, and I like the way that Dan thinks and talks. And he's all around good guy. So it is great to have you on the show, Dan. Thank you for coming on board.
Thank you. 17 years. It seems such a long time when you say it like that. It's not felt like 17 years.
Well, look, Dan, first of all, amazing to have you on. And let's pick up on that a little bit, because clearly you've been able to rise through the ranks through a company structure and a mammoth organization that is Santander. What's the secret sauce?
Yeah, good question. Probably a bit of luck, I would say, and good fortune. Getting yourself well positioned at the right times and frankly the help of the right people. I joined Santander, it's May the 22nd 2006. I don't know if that's good or bad that I can remember the exact date given it's so long ago, but relatively sort of mid-junior level, which was to measure advertising. Back then the way they measured advertising was rotating 0800 telephone numbers on press ads. So it was relatively basic, and my job was to kind of build something out that I guess had a more considered review of whether marketing was effective or not. And I kind of moved through from there. I went into planning our campaigns, I went into running our sponsorship functions and did loads of different things. But I guess the core thread was it definitely felt like there were moments to be in the right place at the right time, and that's a little bit about how you push yourself and how you make sure that what you're doing is front and center and people see it. But I probably wouldn't have achieved all of those steps without Keith Moore, who at the time was the CMO and believed in me and dragged me along through the organization to different roles that helped him and helped the function, but also clearly helped me. So I wouldn't look at all of it and say it's because I did a ninja job everywhere. You've got to do a good job to be noticed, of course, but you need the help of those that believe in you. You need the help of mentors. You need the right people around you. And frankly, you need a bit of good fortune, because there's lots of other good people in the department and they were all capable and willing and hungry to make those same moves. So yeah, a bit of all of those ingredients, I would say.
Great shout out to Keith, legend. If you're listening, Keith, all the best what you're doing. We've been trying to get him on for the show for a little while. It will transpire. A lot of people on the show have talked about luck and different spins on it. I think luck is often opportunity taken. You don't get to have luck if you don't have the opportunity. But you said sometimes you have to push yourself in there. So what tips would you give to young folks who are thinking about how do I push myself forward at that right time? So the context has been set and I've got the support, but kind of how do you smash yourself in there?
Yeah, this was something. I worked for a lady at Accenture called Paula Constant. She does a different job now, but she was the first person who made me realize that no one's going to promote you. You've got to accept promoting yourself. And I couldn't get my head around that. I remember she said to me, I did a piece of work, you've got to show the program manager, Justin. And I was like, he doesn't need to see it. Why would I just send it him just for the sake? She's like, because you need him to have visibility of what you're doing. And for me, it was just this sort of cringy, look what I'm doing, look at me type approach that it felt too contrived. It made me feel very uncomfortable, but she was absolutely right. And when I got to Santander, I started to do more things where I would propose projects that weren't proposed in the first place to try and give myself profile, to work on the kind of things that I knew could help put me in the right places, demonstrate the right skills. And you know, sometimes even just making sure you're in the corridor at the right moment so that when the boss walks down, you accidentally are there to have the conversation. There are some slightly cringy, contrived things that, frankly, I've had to get comfortable with because they're really helpful. They do make a difference to the networks that you build, to that support then that you get given, and to make sure that you have the opportunity to put those pieces of work in front of the right people, because if you don't, they're not going to know about them and they're not going to know about what you're capable of. So getting comfortable with that side of things, getting the balance right so it wasn't too cringe, was a really good learning. And I when I look back now, I didn't notice it at the time, but I think she was critical to what I ended up doing after that. And that advice was gold dust.
Dan, honestly, I think that's wonderful advice. You know, I think to some extent, okay, you know, you talk about it being contrived. I think there was another phrase that I've heard around planned serendipity. And I wonder what side of the coin, you know, we certainly sit on. But what you're alluding to perhaps is the right side of the right sort of notions of personal branding, but standing for being credible, you know, being in the right moments at the right time to then highlight key things that could add value to an organization. And I wondered if, you know, perhaps you have a perspective, and you're talking about this from an internally organizational focus as opposed to an outward endeavor that people often think about when it comes to personal branding. But in an organizational setting, I just wonder if maybe there are some pieces of advice around that visibility bit. And of course, you're sitting in a position where others are potentially looking to you to gain some visibility with you. So perhaps are there any pieces of advice that you could lend to us in that respect?
That's a tough question. There's something I say a lot to grads who join our function or some of the new members is I always say to them, come talk to me in a month or so. Tell me how you're getting on. What's your perspective on the place? You've got fresh ideas. I want to hear them. You'll look at things a different way. And frankly, I just want to know if your expectation of being here is the same as what you perceived before you turned up. And they never come. And there's this inbuilt, I think, no matter what, because our organization in Santander, and particularly the marketing function, is, I'd like to think, very open, very transparent, very flat, but still people come with this preconceived hierarchical structure, I think. And there's a sense of don't bother the director, don't send him too many messages, he's too busy. It's a nonsense. And so I think the thing I'd say is be brave and bold, step up. People say they've got an open door, test it. Go and turn up, go and knock on the door, put time in their diary. In most cases, I think they're absolutely willing, and it isn't just saying the right thing. I think they do want to hear from people. They would open the door. I think you've got to have some courage, though, and be brave to step forward and take that opportunity, as opposed to sort of quietly sit in the background, assuming that that's not the thing to do. I had this very conversation this week, actually. We had a new joiner, and I said the same thing. I said, please, in a month, come back. You'll be the first. So let's see. In a month's time, I'll let you know if we're starting to break the back of that one. But I do remember back when I was in a more junior role, one of, like, at the time, because now you look back, you understand to some degree why people have that level of fear about it. But Exco seemed a mile away. It seemed so senior. And when one of our Exco members said the same thing to me, I've got an open door, come whenever you want. 2 weeks later, I just knocked on his physical door in his office, and he was true to his word. And actually that relationship was really a really important one to me. It's what got me into a position ultimately where I was planning our advertising campaigns and the rebranding of the bank and the launch of 123, which for us were kind of the milestone ones. So yeah, I think the advice is simply to just take people on their word, test that out, be bold and courageous and step forward.
What you're talking about is quite deep, actually, in terms of people finding the courage in the face of fear, paranoia, insecurity. But it is so true. You know, no matter how senior anybody is, they're still human. Now, somebody once said something to me. I'm going to say this. I don't know if I should, but I think I will. It's slightly outdated now, but somebody said, you know, we're all human, even the Queen poos. And so it was to shatter this thought that, you know, people are some way sort of humanly different, and they're not. Everyone's a human being. But yeah, I mean, it's not easy to face into those fears in the face of, you know, very senior people who seem to be intimidating when actually they're not.
You know, Mark, I just want to jump in for 1 second around this, and a big shout out to Sophie Neary for sort of describing this concept. But what I think, Dan, you've described here is what she said to us a few weeks ago when she said, "Don't self-reject." And I thought that was a really profound aspect. She said, if anyone's going to say no to you, let them say no to you. Don't say no to yourself, you know? And I found that just a really cool little anecdote and something that's ringing true in my mind. And certainly I think perhaps it's intertwined in the sentiment that you've just gave us just now. So
yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with that. It's a nice way to wrap it up. But I think it is quite easy to forget what it was like when you were more junior. So I come into meetings now just expecting everyone's relaxed, let's have the chat. But I remember back when I was more junior, coming to the meeting with the CMO or the director was scary. You were worried, will I perform well? When I get the chance to speak, will I do a good job? Will I be fluent? If he asks a difficult question or if she asks a difficult, you know, digging into the data and I don't know the numbers, what does that mean for me? There was a lot of fear. There's a lot of sort of anxiety and prep, and you forget that. And that's why, whilst I recognize this challenge I've got still to try and unlock it, I do put myself in their shoes and understand and take myself back to why that's difficult. And that's a bigger challenge than to solve for. I think the culture we're trying to build to flatten everything, to make it feel like everyone, as you say, is just the same, we're all one, everyone contributes, feels like the right approach, but it certainly hasn't cracked it fully yet, because I think that's such a barrier.
Yeah. Okay, let's rewind. Interested to know what influenced you in growing up, and what was the ... to taking a marketing degree?
That's deep.
Yeah,
deep. Well, let's start with the latter, because I think that's easier. So why did I end up doing a marketing degree? I went to university to do accountancy. And the reason I went to university to do accountancy was because I did A-level maths and it was utter hell. It was the hardest 2 years. It was so tough. And there were interventions from the teacher like, you're not going to pass, you know, what are you going to do? And it just felt so dramatic. And when I scraped through and passed, I was just, I've got to make this A-level pay now. Those 2 years cannot be in vain. They have to now be the foundation of what I do next. So off I go to do accountancy. But in the first year at Aston, you kind of do every other business degree. Everyone does a bit of everyone's, largely so you've got a good broad grounding, but also I think to give you the chance to see other flavors and decide if they're the right ones for you. And I remember vividly, it's not a very impressive story, by the way. But in came a guy from one of the big accountancy firms one day to describe what it was going to be like when you finished uni. And I just remember him saying, once you finish these 4 years, you've then got 4 years of professional exams whilst doing the job. And I was just like, nah, that doesn't, no, thank you. So I switched to marketing. And the reason I switched to marketing was very simply, we had our accountancy lecturer, I can't remember his name, but it was an old guy, such a character, had a cane. And every time he had a lecture, he would point his cane at different people. And the same thing he'd do every week, make the same joke, was when he gave out the homework, he'd always say, but for marketing folk, you can have an extra week. So I assumed, well, marketing must be quite simple then if he thinks everyone in marketing needs an extra week for their homework. So I just kind of take a slightly easier path. And then actually found that other than organizational behavior, hated that part and all the Maslow stuff, didn't like it. The rest I really liked. So probably driven by laziness, frankly, and a wish to get away from something I was finding too hard, I found something I liked. So again, bit of fortune driven out of a fairly unimpressive set of decisions. Childhood's harder to answer. it feels like there's quite a lot of things in my childhood, but it felt very normal. I was sort of normal middle-class kid. There's nothing too on the edge of the spectrums about my childhood. I had great parents. They looked after me, a sister, good friends around me. Very fortunate when we moved to Milton Keynes when I was 6. Every other house had a child who was 6. So I had this group of friends I still have today, who I all grew up with. I do feel like I grew up with a sense of trying to prove the odds wrong, though. That there was something in me that felt inferior to some degree, always. I think I'm short or skinny. I've always looked quite young. And there's something about that I think made me feel like I had to prove myself. So there was definitely something as I grew up that was a sense of fighting the odds, which is ridiculous because I come from a difficult background. You know, it's not a Rocky story. But I do feel that I had that sense of inferiority that I was trying to fight against. And I think that's always driven me. I'm a very competitive individual. One of the things I think I'm good at is my brain works very quickly, because I think it's grown up scanning the environment constantly, judging what's going on, figuring out how people are perceiving me. I think that's in there is some learning I can't quite grasp. That's clearly part of my DNA. Yeah, I won't go on because I'm probably just going to be generic about it. But there's definitely something in that, I think.
Well, Dan, you're in safe company with me and Mark, because we are both of both short as well, and I wouldn't say skinny anymore, but certainly in that way. But it was interesting. We were at a conference earlier this week, and they had the CMO of Dove come on stage, and he talked about the role of body shaming, body consciousness, and the impact and what it was as a mental health epidemic, to the size and to the commercial size. I think it was about 500 billion, the study was shown, and the impact that it then has on health, mental health, and the like, and then of course the psychological element of it. And I do find it fascinating that you mentioned that as a way to sort of almost use it as a springboard and a motivating factor to then fight against the odds. I wonder, do you believe that's sort of the case, and perhaps as even in your professional life, is that perhaps a conscious decision to try and overcome those elements, both maybe in your own career, but perhaps even in things like advertising and the like?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely, in my insecure moments, I worry about. In the past, I've worried about my kind of physical brand and my gravitas, and when you get into leadership roles, you have to have some level of ability to kind of draw people in, and what makes me insecure about that is more my physical self than it is my emotional self, or the way I can speak, or my ability in terms of skills and capabilities. So it always plays there in the background, and it definitely affects the way I think about casting in ads, for example. It definitely affects the way I think about the team and the diversity of backgrounds and people that we have in that team, because those experiences shape different viewpoints. There was one session I was on a mentoring program a while back, and I can't remember the guy's name, but there was the chap from Google who came and did the sort of preamble speech before you get paired with your mentee and what have you. And he was telling a story about the phrase thinking outside the box. Those naff phrases, but he was basically saying it's not possible, because in your mind is a set of boxes that you just jump between, and they're just experiences you've got. They're driven by your same biases. They're just things that you've grown up with, and in they go. And when you try and think outside the box, you just jump to one of your other boxes, but it's still infected by the same biases, privileges, prejudices that you have. So the only way to think outside the box is to get new boxes, and the only way to get new boxes is to speak to people who don't think like you. And that's really driven my mentality with the team, is how do we get people in who don't think like us, who approach a problem from a completely different angle, who ask the question we would never even think to ask or consider? Because I think that makes our team a better place, that makes us better individuals, that makes us stronger, and it makes our work better.
So, Dan, honestly, sorry, Mark, I keep butting in here. This is really hitting a nerve with me, because I've had so many similar thoughts, to be honest. And I've often even researched, heights of CEOs. As weird, but just to kind of get a sense of actually, can you as people of our stature achieve that sort of thing?
It's
And
funny
I guess,
you say that. Like, I had this chat with my daughter, my two girls, 10 and 8. They're quite short, obviously, at the moment. They're never going to be tall because I'm not and mum's not. But they kept mentioning that one of the kids in school is very tall, sort of makes fun in a nice way, not really bully way, just sort of light-hearted way, constantly mentions their height. And I was sort of giving them some ammunition to sort of give the banter back. And then I started to look up, like, how many of the world's most successful people are above 5'8". So just trying to find a seed to say, look, short people really succeed. And I actually don't want to get onto this short thing. It's not massive for me. I'm not constantly worried that I'm too short. It's not like I've got this massive complex. It's really just, I guess it's a bit of imposter syndrome. It's a bit of insecurity that I think probably driven more by I look young. So when I look a bit older nowadays, but a few years back, I look at some pictures. One of my team sent me a picture, they were sending a picture around recently of when we did a shoot of Rory, Jess and Jensen, some of the sports stars we used to sponsor, and they were all having a laugh going, Dan looks about 12.
So that's a good thing, Dan. It's a good thing.
Well, in years to come, that will be
absolutely
exactly. You'll be so. Let's do a wrap on the short thing. Other than my son, when my son's trying to have a dig, he's like about 4 or 5 inches taller than me. So I'm 5'8". He's just over 6 foot. He calls me big man, and we all know that what his intention is. Okay, so we talked a bit about you can't think outside of the box. So I met with Andrew White from Oxford University Sade Business School yesterday, and he said that even instinct is based on previous data, historical data, and I kind of agree. I think our brain can make some leaps, but on the subject of instinct, we've both worked in financial services, marketing. It's pretty, need for rigor and all that. So what role has instinct played in the work that you've done through the years?
It's the key part of me, I think. So we did this thing called emergenetics once, like one of these training courses that places you in a quadrant, one of 4 colors, which is your sort of preference state. And there's blue, which is really analytical. There's red, which is all people. There's yellow, which is sort of creative and right brain. And there's green, which is structure. And we all did this exercise, and then you had to stand in the corner of the room. I wasn't in the role I'm in now, but I was in the marketing function. It was when Keith led the team. And you had to stand in the corner of the room that reflected your preference color. I was the only person in the corner that was blue, which means that I'm analytical. I'm more data and tech and analytics, which makes sense given my Accenture background and where I came from. But I entirely drive my decisions about our marketing on instinct. So there is always that analytical lead up. But for example, we were with the agency yesterday looking at work. I know within 2 seconds. So I don't do it, but because they'd get really annoyed with me. But as soon as they start to speak, I already know. So I can already say, don't bother with this one, or this one's great, and it's the end of the topic because this one's great. And that's all instinct. It has to be instinct. And I always describe myself as I'm not kind of a learned marketer. I'm not innately a marketer. But what drives my decisions is 100% instinct. I then go into a very blue space off the back of it. I analyze, I think, I process, I throw data at it. I'm always thinking and analyzing about how you mold it from there, but the origin comes from instinct and instinct only. Wow.
I mean, coming from, as you mentioned, coming into Santander as the effectiveness guy, it's remarkable, actually, and I think, clearly, as you said, the prelude is instinct, but then of course it is all the rigor behind that then comes into the forefront. But there is absolutely a thought there initially of what brings it to mind. It made me think maybe a slightly left field question, But what is it? What was it like, or is it like to work with Ant and Dec? And maybe how did that decision come about? Was that instinct? What was the thinking there?
Definitely. So what's the context of the Ant and Dec decision? So we felt we'd lost a bit of mojo as a brand, a bit of swagger. I think when we entered the market, we had sports stars at the front of our ads. They're very polarizing, but we felt almost ubiquitous. We were very noisy, disruptive propositions. The brand had a real energy, I think, which is probably easy because we were new on the high street, and post-financial crisis, people just thought banks were all the same. So it was kind of easier to look different, but still, I think we did a good job with that. But then there was this period that was a bit flat. I think we kind of lost that energy. And we were also about to enter a period where wider digital transformation of the bank meant suppression of the marketing budget. It meant of us all, regardless, not just marketing, but all of us pitching in to help re-platform the place effectively so we could be quicker and innovate faster and do all the things that you'd want to do. So we always knew, okay, we're heavily outspent by our peers anyway, and this was going to be a period that was going to be even worse. So we kind of had in the back of our minds, we need something that's going to punch above its weight, and we need something to capture that energy. But whilst that was in the back of our minds, what was driving our brief was about sort of more of a purpose alignment piece of work. And we went through round one, nothing was clicking. We went to round two, and the only thing on, like they just said, we've got one other thing. It's not really to brief, kind of came out of not the part of the creative agency that typically stuff comes out of for us. And they just showed us that logo, Ant and Dec, with our flame in front of it. And that was it. We knew it's the right thing at that point, because lots of people kind of, if they dislike the Ant and Dec thing, the typical criticism we see is, oh, it's a bit lazy to think Ant and Dec sounds like Santander. We didn't ever have a conversation about it sounding like Santander. We had a conversation about it looking like Santander, and the ability that gave us to have instant fluency. So we use System 1, and you guys know System 1 well. Our fluency traces are up to almost 100% in about 3 seconds, and they stay there. So with people now, they don't watch ads from start to end. They're on their phone, they're flicking. If they do it for 2 seconds, they know it's Santander, and that's the first job. So yeah, it was, I think that's like a sort of mythical story to this now, but I think it was one of the more junior technical types in the agency who just went one day, oh, this looks a bit like, and they were like, ta-da, and then, yeah, then there it came.
What a great story, because 1, 2, 3 was very mechanical. I mean, it was insight, proposition, reason to believe, it was all the sort of classic stuff. Whereas Ant and Dec is plucked from the sky. It's a moment of creative genius that came maybe slightly randomly. And you're bang on. It does all the System 1 stuff, characters and all the Ehrenberg Bass distinctive brand asset stuff, and a twist on your logo. So it is in the rearview mirror, it's hindsight. But I'm interested to know sort of what internal process and resistance you had, because it was such a change in style and tone. So what do you have to do to influence the boardroom that this was a sane and logical thing to be doing?
It wasn't as hard as you might presume, because actually the thread that we've had throughout we've only existed as a brand since 2010. That's when Santander as a name was converged from a set of building societies. But ever since, pretty much with just one exception period, we've had celebrities or ambassadors, as we'd call them, fronting our advertising. So that thread was always there, and that felt then it was just a different angle, but of course it was still using that type of mechanic. Keith this was sort of the last thing Keith was around for at Santander, was making this decision, this choice, and we all agreed. So he had the first chat with the CEO, and the CEO was immediately behind it. I think the same instinctive reaction we had was, I think he was really keen to see the recapturing of that energy, and I think he could see this vehicle doing it. Pretty much straight after that, Keith was off to his next gig, so it landed with me in terms of the exco sessions and what have you. But we didn't really get pushback from anywhere other than a slight fear in our board of the reaction of our parent group. For all of their brilliance, our Spanish pals don't do irony too well. It doesn't translate perfectly. So it was quite difficult to explain what we were doing, and they were a little unhappy actually with Ant and Dec's use of our brand. And so the first request they gave us was, can't they have a different logo and use a different color? And it was kind of like, but you're missing the point of the entire campaign construct. So that was a bit tricky, sort of from I guess a brand protection point of view. Our global organization were a little resistant. But the only real pushback we've had on the campaign is from, I guess, the corporate and commercial part of our bank. Actually, the guy who leads that part of the bank's very pro the campaign. But if you're one of the sort of regional teams as Santander corporate and commercial, you're not actually very well known. We're not very well known as a commercial bank. So when you turn up in to see the CFO of a big organization to try and bank them, you're up against a Lloyd's or a NatWest, very credible, known player in that space. This probably doesn't help you look like the credible, serious alternative for those types of deals. But beyond that, I think it's been universally accepted, with one exception, which is the exception for anyone and everyone, including customers and including our staff, which is for those people that don't like Ant and Dec or have an issue with Ant's situation related to drink driving, they can't forgive it. They can't qualify that it's acceptable to have it. And I can completely understand that perspective. That perspective will never change, regardless of what we do. But in the process of that deal, we thought long and hard about that, and we weighed that up, and we took a decision that said an individual has taken accountability for a situation. They've sought the help that they needed to resolve that situation, and humans should be given second chances. And it was, I think, about a week later, before we were about to sign the deal, that they won the NTA again, which was voted for by the public. So there was a signal then, at least, of public opinion about them still being, okay, no one's ever going to condone the situation, but we're willing to look at where you go from here. So that's the main pushback we got, particularly amongst staff. But otherwise, positive support.
Very interesting. It's always fascinating to hear the backstories. I just want to push a tiny bit more on the fact that the Spanish counterparts didn't get the irony. And then you just sort of glossed over the fact that that must have been a difficult conversation. So I'm interested about what was the techniques of influence when people ultimately, working off a different humor construct, probably just literally don't get it.
Yeah.
How did you influence through that?
It wasn't easy. So I remember the first chat was a phone call, just a phone call. One of our global colleagues, know them well, really great individual, very supportive to us. And it was trying to understand the campaign. And I was trying to help them understand it back. And so the first thing I said is, so you know The Office, right? You've seen The Office? No. Okay. Like a spoof. No, what does spoof mean? Okay, this is tough. Like, I was always running out of examples I could give to explain it. But ultimately I still think today they don't really understand the construct. But the process of getting past it there was no sort of magic. I haven't got this phrase I'm about to pull out, which is, oh my God, this is the greatest way to manage stakeholders I've ever heard. It was just talking. It was reassurance. It was a little bit of hold them at bay and wait for the first ads to get out and show the reaction and show the impact and try and get them convinced by just being there and getting more comfortable with it. I probably only had 2 or 3 conversations, which were mainly around explaining why it was critical to the construct that we played with the brand, and talking about the examples where we played with it before, to give that precedent and remind them of those benchmarks where we can be playful with our brand, and also some examples from other brands that we use to kind of demonstrate that. And for example, we'd done quite a few Christmas campaigns up to this point where we changed Santander to Santa and Dear, or Secret Santa, and whatever else. And we've done those sort of playful things. So it was a bit of all of those. I mean, everyone will do this kind of thing. They'll show examples that help them realize it's okay, show other brands doing the same thing, remind them of ones we've done before, ask a little bit for forgiveness, not permission, by pushing it out before anyone's kind of said you can't. And then hoping it works so you can show. But I would still say to this point, if we're ever in the board talking about the campaigns, I think there's still a portion of our global group that just kind of skip the UK bit because they don't really get what that's about. They just know that they've been told it's our most successful campaign vehicle ever. And I think they just accept that.
Sounds like trust as much as anything. Yeah, thanks, Dan, for the elaboration. Sorry, Richard.
Yeah, sorry, there's no sort of magic sauce that I've got on that one. It is just that normal of back and forward that you go through many times on this sort of thing.
I don't, I absolutely right. I don't think there needs to necessarily be a magic source of sorts. I mean, that's business. That's how life works. But the one thing that I think, reflecting on what you've just described, and you use the word everybody deserves, or phrase, everybody deserves a second chance. And actually, it takes a real empathetic leader, probably both from yourself and Keith at the time, to then actually see above and beyond what perhaps was the misdemeanors of the day. And I wouldn't necessarily underestimate the power of your thinking and philosophy and empathy around it, which then actually helped ultimately, you push the campaign out to the other side. And then, of course, your ability to justify in your own mind why you did certain things as well. But on the context of second chances, then, clearly no leader has got to where you are without making a few faux pas. So I wonder if there's any to recall or count on or think about where you have made sort of things that you kind of go, oh shit moments or whatever it is, and maybe some of the things you've learned from.
Yeah, there's lots. I can hear Keith swearing down the phone at me like a number of occasions. My favorite one was I had to fly out to Northern Ireland because our chief exec at the time, Anna Botine, who's from the family that ran the bank, she's now our exec chairman globally, but at the time she was the UK CEO. She was playing golf with Rory Mack at a pro-am as part of our sponsorship of Rory. And I was there effectively as the bag carrier and the umbrella holder. And actually I did it when she came off the course, it was absolutely pouring down. And I just stood holding an umbrella over her head while I got absolutely drenched. But it was the same weekend that we were launching a piece of activity during the London Olympics, which we called the London Grand Prix. It's where we create this fictional, brought to life experience of what a Grand Prix in London would be like, using Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button at the time. It was our way of kind of getting a bit of noise during the Olympics when otherwise Lloyd's, who was sponsoring the torch relay, were going to sort of dominate the airwaves. And we basically forgot to tell the corporate comms team. So this thing launched, and obviously we knew we were playing off the back that at the time Bernie Ecclestone was always hinting at a London Grand Prix, that it was all there as a PR machine to go crazy, and it went nuts. And so you can imagine the press office coming in the morning and the phones are just going absolutely ballistic, and it's like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell them about this one. And I remember sitting on a suitcase in Paddington Station, because once I'd come back from this golf event, my phone was just going crazy with Keith. It's like, where are you for this catch-up call? So I dial in and it says, Dan Sherwood has joined the call. And then it's silent for a while. And then I can hear Keith sort of going off a bit. And then he's like, where the F is Dan? And I'm like, I'm effing here. I've been on the call for 20 minutes. We had this big ding dong. Whereupon he forgets that he sent me to Northern Ireland in the first place. But with Keith, he just couldn't backtrack at that point. So yeah, that was one. And actually that made a big difference, because one of the biggest things I constantly am sort of talking to my team about is we've got to connect in all of the different areas. We've got to be the most collaborative function in the bank. We have to be the ones that everyone's part of what we do, and we do it together with teams. And I think those moments like that, where it's a small error, you'll get over it quickly, just rebrief them quickly, it's all fine. But can feel quite like a big deal in the moment.
Yeah.
The other mistakes that I make, typically the same one recurrently, which is, and it's one of my bugbears overall, so sorry if I end up ranting a bit at this point, but it's not preparing our more senior stakeholders more on marketing, on how marketing works, on the trends in marketing. And the bugbear bit of that is, I honestly feel like marketing's the only function that you don't seem to have to educate yourself about in an organization and can get away with. Whereas as a marketer, I'm fully expected to understand all of the commercial stuff, all of the strategy stuff, all of the risk stuff. I'm expected, if I turned up and said, how much is a bank account worth again? I mean, I'd be fired. But people are allowed to ask me, did people really still watch telly? That's what? No, a cursory Google search will do the job. I mean, you should have a basic understanding, right? But you seemingly don't need to. And I think the challenge then we face is we get questions like that. When we share media plans, we get questions about why is it not all digital? Don't get me started on the word digital marketing. But we get those things. And I think I can rant all I want about, well, why can't people be expected to understand our field like we're expected to understand theirs? The point is they're not at the moment. So it's our job. And we need to make sure we do a good job of bringing those stakeholders along with the trends of the day, of understanding what the realities are. And when we don't, we cause ourselves trouble. So that's something I continually remind myself about because I continually fail to do.
Gosh, I find myself being crude twice this morning, but I don't think it was Rory Southern. It might have been, but somebody said opinions on marketing are like arseholes. Everyone's got one. Anyway, Dan, we're coming to the end. So last question. I asked this question a couple of nights ago to Stephen Bartlett, no less. I'll tell you what his answer was. I'll tell you.
Name drop, Mark. Name drop.
There you go. Got to get it in there. A bit too much this morning. I must sort of reel back on that. But no. What are you ambitious for, and what's enough?
Oh, and you're going to compare me to Stephen Bartlett, one of modern times' great speakers. That's a really good question. I've thought a lot about this actually, because the guy who employed me at Santander just retired, and I kind of remember one of the chats I had with him was he when he was younger had this sense of growth and ambition about his career, and then he described being at the top of a slope that was forever downwards from there, and it was just about survival. And so I thought about, well, what's the crest of the hill for me? And I think I'm trying to get to a place where I feel like I am enough now. I've got enough now. I've done enough now. I guess to Stephen's point, I think if I understand what he was trying to get at was, got to realize you're enough and stop pushing too far for things that are, when is it just right to say, well, I've done it, I'm good, I'm happy, it's great. And I'm trying to get myself comfortable with that being the case. For example, I definitely don't have ambitions to move up beyond the role I'm in. I think I'll be a marketing leader for the rest of my time, but I don't want to be a CEO, for example, because I think what motivates me now is others. I'm more motivated at seeing good talent progress than I am worried about my career. I'm in the place I wanted to get to, and I'm enjoying it, and it gives me the opportunity to make more of a difference or try to help others more. That's hard when you've got a small marketing team because there's never enough opportunities or spaces or vacancies to progress talent like you would want to. But it's some of the other ways. It's doing things like the hospital work that I do now. It's doing things like trying to push my team to spot good talent and break the rules of the organization to progress it quicker. I think the other thing I was thinking about was in your question list, but is how to get more young people interested in marketing. Because my problem at the moment is my kids just look at marketing and advertising as a pain. It's another button to press to skip so I can watch the thing I want to watch on YouTube. I think we've got to get people under the hood a bit, under the bonnet of what we do. Because actually my kids got really excited when I explained that one day Daddy bought a truck. This is when we were doing the numbers game financial education roadshow. We bought Vodafone's old festival truck and turned it into this onboard transformed curriculum that we took around towns and cities. When Dad comes home and says, you get to buy a truck as a marketer, they're like, wow, buying trucks, that's amazing. And when I tell them, actually, we get to do social media, they're interested. But you presume they know that's what marketing teams do, but they don't. And they just think advertising's annoying. So I think we have to do a better job of explaining what the career path is and what's in it. Because I think once we do, people get quite excited, and that's how we can get more of them in. But that's kind of what fills my head at the moment. That's what I find fulfilling, is how can we do that? How can we solve those challenges? I'm not really worrying about my career at this point.
Brilliant. That's a great place to step out, I think, in terms of I am enough now, and it's not all about me. And the here to your last thought, which is this is why the School of Marketing exists, is to help people plot a career into marketing, which is often misunderstood, doesn't have great awareness, understanding, but can provide a very rich and successful pathway, as it has in your case. So I'm going to say a few words, and then hand to Richie to say what he would say as well. This is what I took out. So bravo, Paula Constant, who made a really good point, which is that you've got to grab it, cringeworthy as it may be, and until you get used to it, feels like, hey, look at me. You've got to get comfortable with and deal with the fear of putting yourself forward. If you don't expect anybody else to. Such an important point. We talked a little bit about a sense of insecurity and inferiority based on your physical self, but how that has motivated you and drives you. And I don't think holds you back, actually, for all of us. It's that sense of insecurity, whatever its source is, which provides momentum. We talked a lot about instinct. You said you're not a learned marketeer. I mean, what is a learned marketeer? I love the fact that you are inherently a blue analytical person, but put so much emphasis on instinct and then reverse back into the data. So your chemistry of marketing effectiveness has a lot going for it, because the balance of instinct but rigor all at the same time. Love talking about Ant and Dec and getting the mojo and the swagger back, and overcoming non-logical conversations where people just won't be in tune with the humor that underpins the campaign. And I took out of that, you clearly had built trust, yourself and Keith, because otherwise there wasn't a logic that was ever actually going to work. In the end, you probably, even if you didn't say it out loud, you were asking to be trusted. And we talked about having second chances and the empathy there, and Richie really caught that well. You've had your oh shit moments, haven't we all? But through all of this, I think it's very clear to me, you're not up your own arse. You're a level-headed person. You haven't let it go to your head. You're very comfortable with calling out the fact where you're not trying to change everything in the world and be the super CEO. You're happy to talk about your mistakes. I think that makes you quite accessible. So I've really liked this. Some of these shows, there's a bit of grandstanding. You've left the name dropping and the bragging to Richie and I today, mainly to me. And I've just enjoyed it, because I think there's some really rich learning and insight and advice for people thinking about plotting their marketing career. So thank you, Dan, and over to you, Richie.
Thank you, Mark. Really well summed up. Dan, for me, it's been a remarkably rich conversation, and you've pulled both in my heart and my mind in so many ways, and for that I thank you. I loved your last anecdote, which you sort of almost, paraphrasing. You said, I am, I'm happy and I am where I want to be. And that's actually, as a leader who's now got to where you are, I feel that's just genuinely such a lovely position to be in your own mind. And it must be a content place, which is just really nice. And just to tail off, and we hadn't talked about the role of mentors and mentorship during the conversation, but I can just see such a common and rich thread in your mind around the people that have helped you get to where you want to be. And you never forget them, Keith Moore being clearly one that you mentioned a few times. And I just want to, really shout out to those type of people, and Keith especially, for what he's done, for what he's been able to instill. And I'm sure you're carrying on his legacy in Santander in many ways, through your leadership now. So it's remarkable. So thank you, Dan, for your time and for your insights. It's been really, really good.
No, I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.